Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome. Also, good evening. We can't forget people who are in the evening time zone. This is USA Global TV and Radio, and I am Dr. Jacalyn-Kerbeck, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our show today. Our show is Authentic Achievements, and our topic is finding fulfillment beyond external validation. Wow, that is a big one, right? Joining me today is the star of our show. She's actually the creative genius behind Authentic Achievement. She has her own platform, which we'll hear more about. She's located in the United Kingdom. She is an author. She's a coach. She's a mentor. She's a TEDx speaker. Let's welcome KIM-ADELE Randall to the show. Hello.
Hi, Dr. Jacalyn. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Thank you. I'm really good. I always look forward to our conversations. So I'm super excited for this one.
Thank you. I do too. And just for people joining us for the first time, whether they're on Roku Worldwide or on Amazon Fire, we don't have any script. So there's nothing that's been rehearsed. And KIM-ADELE has no idea what I'm going to ask her because I don't know what I'm going to ask her. So I really do enjoy this. So I just mentioned to our audience that you are the creative genius and the founder of Authentic Achievements. You have your own platform. Tell us, what is Authentic Achievements and how can people get involved in getting interviewed directly by you?
Of course. So Authentic Achievements was really born out of eventually finding myself and realizing that success was whatever worked for me. As long as I was being kind and as long as I was being considerate to other people, that actually we can pick our own measure of success. And I love today's topic. I'm looking forward to talking about that later. But once I realized that that you could get that validation internally, then things became so much easier. And I wanted to be able to share other people's authentic journeys to their achievement, to hopefully inspire others to be able to find the path to what they want to achieve. And so Authentic Achievements was born. And Dr. Jacalyn, you were so gracious to give me the opportunity to bring it here to USA Global TV and Radio, for which I'm super grateful.
Well, thank you very much. I'm super grateful as well. Something I want to just touch on because I think this is really important. You've gone through a lot in your life. You've definitely had some major challenges that you've overcome, and yet you're still here smiling. And what I'd love to have you just give an overview because you're beautiful, you're intelligent, you're successful. People don't realize that you have a backstory that maybe other people wouldn't have even been able to comprehend or make it through. So, I know that's a big question, but if you can sort of break it down, what are some of the major challenges that you've had to overcome?
Oh, great question. And I do often joke if I were to do my memoirs, it would be 3 divorces, a stalker, and a legal inner critic, because I have had all of those. I've also had 3 potentially life-threatening illnesses, a couple of car accidents, miscarriage, and then became a mum late on in life and refound myself. So I think sometimes we look at what we see and we assume that everything's always gone swimmingly, and yet very often people have gone through things that we just don't expect. And I look at some of mine, and although they were really big lessons, they were great blessings eventually. So I think what I've learned in life is when you're going through it, it doesn't always make sense, and you don't always understand why you've got to go through what you're going through. But everything in it is either a lesson, a blessing, or both. So what I've found is when I'm not feeling very blessed, I look for the lesson, and that's where the blessing is waiting for me.
I love that. I love how you brought it all back together and made a positive out of it. When you were going through your journey, were you ever feeling alone or isolated because you were going through it and you were going through it by yourself?
Yeah, often. And even though I was surrounded by people, I distanced myself a lot from people. I didn't want to be a burden to them. I didn't want to add to whatever was going on in their world, and inadvertently, therefore, possibly made people feel that I didn't need them when I did. And there've been moments where, I remember one particularly melodramatic moment that I went through, when my marriage had just broken down. I was facing surgery. I'd just quit my job. I'd overnight become a 44-year-old unemployed single mum. It's like, oh my goodness, can life do anything else to me? And I remember being laid on the kitchen floor in floods of tears, thinking, I don't even know how to breathe. And I say it's melodramatic because clearly I do know how to breathe, and I'm still here, and I carried on breathing, and that was 6.5 years ago. But at the time, I was that lost that I didn't know what else to do. And I was fortunate, and I've shared a lot, and I know you know, Dr. Jacalyn, that my little girl is my North Star. And she is my savior, and she saved me again that day. As I was laid there wallowing in my own self-pity and not knowing where to go next, I heard a cry from the other room, and I suddenly realized she didn't ask to be born. She didn't ask for any of this to happen, and she certainly didn't need me to be laid on the floor and leave, not be willing to get up and go to her. And I immediately, of course, did get up and go to her. She'd woken up early, and gave her a feed, and realized that that's what I needed to do every day. Was I needed to get up and be the best that I could be for her. And in those early days, sometimes my measure of success would be that I could adult appropriately for 12 hours. And that might not feel hugely successful to anybody listening or watching, but for me, that was good. That was an achievement, and it meant I could keep moving forward. And I learned through that process that actually that's what I had to be. I had to work out how I could find some moments of success and kind of cling to them to allow me to keep growing, to keep moving forward. And I also learned as I went through and had some further knocks, such as the stalker, etc., that actually I have to ask for help. I have to allow others to come in. I remember a good friend of mine saying to me one day, I can't decide, Kim, if you're incredibly strong or incredibly stupid. And I remember responding, probably both in equal measures. Probably come across as extremely strong because I don't want to add to anybody's burden. And that makes me equally extremely stupid because I don't have to go through this alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just am so in awe of you, everything that you've accomplished, and being a mother later in life, and knowing that your daughter really needs you, and that what you said, she didn't ask to be born. I think we all have that feeling of wanting to be needed. And sometimes it goes to the extreme where you feel like you're suffocating. So when we think about being validated, it feels good to be needed, right? It feels good to be wanted. Where does that line get drawn in the sand where now it's like someone's clinging to you constantly? They're totally dependent. Not a child, obviously. We're talking about adults, but where is that line in the sand?
Oh, that's a great question. And you know, as a lifelong people pleaser, I've crossed that line numerous times, and then found myself in my desire to help people, realizing I'm not helping them. I've actually become their crutch. And that means I'm not passing on any wisdom, any knowledge, any experience that they can take for themselves. And then you become drained. I'm very guilty of having lost myself a few times in my desire to help others. And I never really understood the analogy they said that you should put your own mask on first if you were ever in that situation on a plane. I was like, well, why would you? Surely you'd put it on, you know, the child or somebody else. Until I realized what would then happen. So if I didn't put mine on first and I got Scarlett's on, but then I was unable to put mine on, I'd be leaving my little 7-year-old knowing nobody and with nobody to support her. So actually I stand more chance of helping her if I've put mine on first. And it really took me into a place of having to build appropriate boundaries. And to start off with, I found that really, really hard, because putting myself first in anything felt extremely selfish, until I realized unless I did that, I couldn't be there for other people as much as they needed you to, because eventually you get drained. And as the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. So we have to learn how to kind of set those boundaries and how to appropriately extract ourselves from those situations where actually we're no longer being supportive, we're actually being an enabler. And it was really hard for me when I realized that I'd gone from my desire to help people to actually becoming an enabler for them not to help themselves.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about that on some of our earlier shows. People can always go over to our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Radio, and check that out. So here's a question I have for you as a follow-up to that. We've talked also about trophies. Everybody needs a trophy. Everybody's getting a trophy, awards. I happened last night to watch the roast of Tom Brady. I don't know if you've heard about this or not, but the reason I'm bringing up is because you take a person who's accomplished so many things, and then you actually tear that person down and make fun of the person of all the things that they've accomplished. So we're talking today about external validation, which can be taken away in an instant. And so maybe you accomplish something. Let's think of the Guinness Book of Records, and then somebody outdoes what you did, and now your achievement no longer has value. I'm putting in air quotes. So when we're looking outside for validation, it can be taken away at any time, but yet we're searching for it anyway.
It's so true. And yet I know, certainly in my own experience, even when I got that external validation, I still didn't feel I earned it. I still didn't feel it was really mine. I remember once, and it was actually when I was at Sage, and I'd not been there very long. I'd been there 3 months. And I got awarded Leader of the Year for the person who most lived and breathed the guiding principles. And I was convinced that they didn't mean me, even though they gave it to me. I stood there and I received it. I took the award home. I was like, oh, they've probably got a point to prove to somebody else, or maybe it was just a mistake. A million reasons why it shouldn't actually have been mine. And I was so disrespectful inadvertently to receiving that award, because I was so convinced I wasn't worthy of it. I didn't deserve it. I hadn't earned it. That actually years later, when I spoke to the person that gave it to me, and they chatted to me about all the things that I'd done that they'd admired, I realized I'd inadvertently dismissed their view that I was good at something, because I couldn't attach their external validation to my internal rendering of who I was. So I've seen this external validation work well and work badly on both sides. One, it can be the only thing that prompts us to feel like we're doing okay. But secondly, you can get it and still not believe it, in which case it's almost like not getting it anyway, because you don't take ownership of it. And I think for me, one of my breakthroughs was when I was able to internally agree with what people were externally telling me was true, because I'd been in disconnect on that for so many years. My words of myself were so different to the words people played back that you felt like you were just a big fraud. And yet I realized actually the only person that I was really being fraudulent to was myself, because I wasn't willing to open up and allow the possibility that I might be okay at something.
Or fantastic at many things, as you are. I've watched interviews of A-list celebrities here in the States where one day they were a regular, I'm using air quotes, regular person, and then they were catapulted into this celebrity status with people chasing after them for autographs or photographs, people wanting to borrow money from them. And there was no coaching that was given to them to prepare them for how their life was going to change. And all of a sudden they had limited privacy. Everywhere they went, somebody was following them. And so that takes a big toll on people. And the same thing can happen when you accomplish something in the business world, or even if it's personal, and then people are noticing you, or you're standing out more, or maybe social media, people are following you. So that is also some type of validation. What are your thoughts about it? It can be negative as well. It can be a positive or it can be negative. I think it has to do with your perspective, and then also having your own boundaries.
I completely agree. I think it is about perspective, and it's about having those boundaries. And I think, I remember many years ago now, taking over from somebody I hugely admired. So I stepped up as they left. They come into an interim role to be the MD, and I really admired them. And there used to be an award every month where top 12 employees used to get to go for lunch with the MD, and I understood why that was of value when it was Sean. But all of a sudden, these 12 people were going to have to go for lunch with me. And I was like, who'd want that? Who in their mind wants to come and lunch with me? Until I realized, actually, when I was, working my way up the ladder, if I'd have got to go and have lunch with the MD, I would have really enjoyed that. I would have seen that as a real validation. And it was interesting for me to see how much that had changed now that I was in that seat versus aspiring to be in that seat. So I think sometimes we can make it a real positive. Equally, it does come with its pressure. When you're in those kind of roles, all of a sudden people look to you to have the measure of how things are going. If you look like you're having a really bad day, then people assume it's because the organization's having a really bad day. So you had to learn to try and look on the positive side of life, which I've always tried to do, but I probably really honed in on that when I started doing those roles, because people were constantly looking to you for that sense check, for that temperature check on what things were going like. And so you might have just had a really bad argument, or things might have not been going so well at home, but you kind of had to try and find a way of not showing that, of finding something to smile about that would allow you to add positive energy to the people around you. So I think for me that those kind of, we look at this, and I see loads of people, I chat to lots of people who see these overnight successes in business, or they see seemingly overnight successes in celebrity, and they go, oh, I love that. And it's like, but would you like everything that comes with it? Yes, we might like the adoration, we might like the money, we might like the freedom that brings, but would we like the fact that also people will dislike us as openly and as loudly as the people that like us? Would we also like the fact that actually we may have the freedom that comes with money, but we lose the freedom that comes from anonymity? And which one of those eventually is more important, particularly when it comes to your friends and family and the impact on those? So I think sometimes we just look at the little bits of someone's life that we would like, and we don't ask ourselves, would we be willing to take it all? Because if we're not willing to take it all, we can't really take any.
It's so true. And I love how you brought up anonymity, because sometimes if we want to be anonymous, we can also almost feel invisible. And that feeling of being invisible can lead to loneliness, depression, all kinds of other things. But at the same time, being in the forefront and being in the public eye can also lead to the same thing, feeling isolated and feeling depressed. So, how do we know which is a better path to go?
Great. That is a great question. And I think that, for me, this has been the one thing that kind of like I've learned is we live in a world of polarity. For every up, there's a down. For every left, there's a right. For just how bad complete anonymity can make us feel in feeling insecure and alone and overwhelmed. Equally, the same is true for celebrity. If we have too much of that, then again it can leave us feeling alone, isolated, overwhelmed with the expectations of us. And I think that's the same of literally anything that happens to us in life. Anything that is overplayed can turn from a strength into a weakness, or a weakness into a strength. So I think for me, it's always about trying to find balance and look for those opportunities to get myself back in balance when I find myself out of balance. And being kind to myself with the fact that goes, do you know what? We talk about work-life balance or all these other things. It's like balance is in the moment. So there will always be occasions where you might be more focused on one part of your world than the other part of your world. But as long as it's not every moment is focused on that one part versus the other, then ultimately you will get balance. It's just momentary balance. And when I gave myself the grace to be able to be presently balanced and make conscious choice, life became a little bit easier and a little bit less overwhelming. Because prior to that, I just beat myself up constantly. If I was doing stuff for work, I wasn't being a good enough mum. If I was doing stuff being a mum, I wasn't being a good enough person in my work. If I was doing stuff over here, I wasn't being a good enough friend. There's so many reasons to find fault with ourselves. And we are so prone to do that first, to find the areas that we need to do better at. But I think we have to also balance that by seeing the areas that we do well in, not as an excuse to not get better, but to give us some hope that we are valid, we are worthy, and we are doing the best that we can.
Excellent points as always. Thank you. And I think there's also another part of this that I want to touch on. I was watching an interview of a very famous woman, and her husband is also very famous. And she talked about the fact that she supported his work. She put him first, and they had young children, and she took care of the children. And when he was at home working, she made sure that it was quiet. She did everything she could to support him because he was the primary breadwinner. And then, of course, after the children got to be a certain age, he brought her into the business, and together they've built this incredible empire. So my point is, what if you're in a partnership, a relationship with someone, and they don't support what it is that you're doing? And so instead of giving you that validation, they are constantly putting you down. You're never around. I don't get to spend any time with you, slowly chiseling away at the foundation of the core of who you are.
It's really hard. It's hard when that happens. And I've had that. I've been in that place. And it makes a tough situation already tougher. And at the time, I was already somebody who found my faults. So somebody else sharing my faults was great. Bring them on. Because I was definitely in a place of let's look for things that aren't. But I think in any partnership, it's about being really honest with each other. And it's about kind of sharing what we all need to be able to thrive and survive. Each part is equally valid. Spending the time looking after the children and bringing them up is just as hard and just as rewarding and just as valuable as being the person that's building the security. And I think sometimes when we're in the moments and we get a little bit overwhelmed, it can be easy to assume the other person's life is easier because we're not living that life. We're living our part of that life. And so asking better questions, and I say this having already openly admitted I am the lady who's had 3 divorces. So, don't take relationship advice from me. I'm clearly really bad at it. But I think when I think about my friends and the relationships that I've built since, they're so much better when we're being honest with each other and, appreciating the part the other person plays and sharing that. I do that with my little girl all the time now. We could very easily go, oh, it's really hard work for me. I'm a single mum and I run a business and I've got all these other things that I'm doing, and I've got my little girl to bring up, which I do mainly on my own, and I need to teach her all these things. But actually I see all of that as a blessing, and therefore when she can, the little bits that she can do, I make the time to tell her how much I appreciate that I appreciate the bits that she's done and how much easier that's made my life, because that is probably something I didn't do well previously. I didn't acknowledge that even though they might just be doing a small thing, that was one less thing I had to do.
I always appreciate how honest you are about your life. Thank you for that. What if the validation we're looking for is not from another person, but it's from the almighty dollar, the euro, the whatever currency, the pound, and we're doing what we think is great work, but the money is not in alignment with where we think we should be. And this happens all the time.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's because we're focused on the wrong thing. And I've been guilty of it, really guilty of it. But I think, once I found that if I just focused on where do I add value, where do I make a difference, how do I improve people's lives, make things a bit better for them, and not worry about where does the next pound come from or the next dollar or whatever those parts come from, that actually, one, I did better. So I was more impactful for the people that I was helping. But two, the rest of it worked itself out. I found that whenever I was chasing the money, it was never there. Whenever I wasn't chasing the money, but I was chasing the value I could bring, and I was measuring my success on the value that I'd added. I spent many years in corporate life going through meetings that were a total and utter waste of makeup. And they really were. That I made my mission when I set my own business up to never put anybody in that place. So, my measure of success is that people don't get to the end of a meeting with me and go, that was a total waste of makeup. And it totally shifted my perspective. So it was very much about how can I go back to my roots? As you know, Dr. Jacalyn, I started out as a hairdresser, and there they taught me that actually your job was to find out what was really important to your client. So to understand what it was that they wanted, to help them to try and achieve it, and to have them leave you feeling their very best version of themselves, so that they went out with that value. And that's kind of where my passion came from. And once I started focusing on that in the work I do now, which, yes, is very different to hairdressing, but it's the same three principles. What is it the individual or the organization really wants to do? How do I help them get there? And how do I have them feel better and increased as a result of the interaction with me? And when I achieve that, not only do their businesses grow and thrive, but I feel like I'm adding value. And then, funnily enough, money seems to come back into alignment.
I have never heard that statement before. The meeting was a waste of makeup. I love that.
It might be Kimism. My friend tells me off for those. She goes, "Oh my God, I got Kimism into a work conversation." You've got the weirdest analogies for everything. And I was like, yeah, so how it works in my head.
No, that's a good one. It's a good one. And I was also in corporate, as you know, and I think part of the challenge is even when you're getting a paycheck, right? The check is coming, it's going to be in the bank account. You have really good benefits in some cases. I know for me, I traveled the world, stayed at 5-star resorts, but yet there was something missing and I wasn't feeling the validation there. So I'm in a completely different place today where I feel very validated, but the money's not the same. And that's kind of where wow, it'd be great if they were equal and commensurate. And I guess it's a matter of time. It's a matter of perspective, and it's finding the value and focusing what is that value, because I think that was a great point that you made. We don't often do that. We get so immersed in this tunnel vision. And we, as I love to say, we're no longer that eagle flying above. We're that pelican with our head in the sand.
Yeah. And I encourage you to ask yourself the question, what is my fulfillment worth? So you're now feeling fulfilled and validated because you're doing something that you love and that you're great at, and that adds real value to the world. Yes, it might not yet thoroughly align with what you were earning before, but would you pay the difference to get this level of validation, this level of self-fulfillment, this level of feeling like you're on the right path?
Very true. Very true. And I think it's also interesting that as one person, you do a number of things, I do a number of things, and we can feel validated for certain things and maybe not for others. And I'll give an example. As you know, I teach fitness classes and I've taught fitness classes in the past. And sometimes I really struggle with the fact that I'm 61 and I feel like that imposter syndrome, like should a 61-year-old person be teaching fitness classes? And then I think to myself, well, knock on wood, thank you, God, I am really strong and I'm in great shape. Thank you. Why not? Why not? If I can motivate people and inspire people to push themselves, and then also at the same time ask people to listen to their bodies and do what you can. But I feel that it's interesting as a broadcaster, I feel very validated. I feel very, very very happy with my skill set. Not that I'm not willing to learn, I am. But then there's other areas in my life I'm kind of like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's, I always try and put in that, as you know, I always share quotes that people have said that were important to me. So my nan used to say, every day's a school day. And my granddad used to say, live each day as if it's your last, and one day you'll be right. And I think somewhere between the two of them, they've kind of pretty much given me a good mental for life. So I try and look at things and go, some of them I'm completely validated on now. And I go, yeah, this is me at my best. I'm not saying I am the best. I'm not saying better than anybody else, but this is where I know I'm in alignment with my skill set and it feels like I'm in flow. But because I want to learn and I want to grow and I want to develop, there are some things where I am not there yet. And we've probably all heard that whole analogy of like when you learn to drive a car and you start out and you're unconsciously incompetent. So you have no idea what it is you don't know. And then when you go for your first lesson, you become very consciously competent. You now know how much you don't know. And it's all very terrifying. And then they kind of teach you kind of how to do it. So you become consciously competent. So you can drive it, but you have to think about every move and you have to do everything very carefully. And then if you're like me, I passed my test 30 odd years ago. Now I'm unconsciously competent, that you kind of get in and it's a second, it's like a second skill. It kind of comes without thinking. We all have those moments where we kind of get to one part of the road and go, I don't really remember doing that last bit. I know I was paying attention, but I wasn't thinking about, have I done mirror signal maneuver in the same way that I did 32 years ago when I was sitting my test? And I think that's true of the skills we've got in life. So I always look at mine and go, okay, if I'm growing, if I'm continuing to try and be the best that I can be, then I should have a lot of things where I am unconsciously competent. They just feel like flow because I'm there. But I'm also going to have some where I'm consciously competent. I can do it, but I have to really think about it. And I'm going to have some that I'm unconsciously incompetent about because I've not tried to learn them yet. And actually that for me feels like a pretty good balance, because as long as not everything is where I'm consciously incompetent, and there's the odd thing that I've made it to where I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good. This is like me on Barocca. Then it gives you the freedom to be able to keep growing.
Brilliant as always. Thank you. I agree with that totally. I'd love to have your perspective. What if it was possible? I don't know that it is, maybe for some people it is, but what if it was possible to take out all the emotion when it comes to achievements? Because the emotion is what can either catapult us or hold us back. And I feel like sometimes, even for myself, I become emotional about something and then I'm not using my logical brain. And I don't even know if I'm using anything, but I feel like I'm not progressing because of the emotions that are coming up for me. And that could be fear. It could be anger. It could be that imposter syndrome. What are your thoughts about emotion?
Oh, great question. So we think we're nice, rational, logical human beings, and yet the reality is, and it has been neuroscientifically proven, that our emotional brain responds 24 times faster than our thinking brain. So literally in every situation, we don't respond to what's happening, we respond to what we're making it mean. And I think sometimes it's not about removing the emotion, it's about sitting with it. So why am I fearful? So fear hasn't happened yet. I've had to imagine the thing I'm fearful of for me to be fearful of it. But equally, I'd have to imagine the thing I'm hopeful for, because that hasn't happened yet either. And both of those will have been created in the same brain, mine. So I get to choose which one of those I think is more likely and more credible. Now, my natural stance is to believe that more likely and more credible is the thing I'm fearful of. But I realize now that that is just the thing that holds me back. And so I try and do, and I've mentioned a couple of times maybe that Scarlett's my North Star, but I think we've all got somebody that we really care about and that we believe in. And so when I find myself in those moments where I'm telling myself things that are doubtful or hurtful or mean, if this were, I use Scarlett, but I would recommend to anybody listening that you insert the name of the person that means the most to you. If this were so-and-so in this situation, what would I say to them? Well, I'd say to them, what's the worst that can happen? Give it a go. And I think we're so quick to put labels on ourselves. And for me, one of the most powerful words in the English language is the word yet. When we add that to whatever we're telling ourselves, we open up a world of opportunity. So, for example, my little girl came home last week. She's like, oh, Mummy, I'm not very good at colouring. And I went, no, you're not very good at colouring yet, but let's look at the facts. So how good is your colouring today versus last week? Well, it's much better, Mummy, and my drawings are much easier to understand. Okay. And how much better are your colouring and your drawings last week than last year? Oh, they're much better, Mummy. And how do you feel about your colouring now? I'm getting better, aren't I? Yeah. It's a simple reframe, but by putting the word yet in there and then looking for evidence of how far you've come, you can start to see the reality, which is you're improving, you're progressing, you're learning.
I love that you have these conversations with her and that she's getting it. She's seeing the progression that she's making. That is so important because, as we both know, when we're young, that's when a lot of this negativity or the self-doubt starts to come in. And as we get older, we have to see therapists, we have to do all this work to try to unpack whatever it is. So, in alignment with what we're talking about today, what about the shoulds? When someone will say, like, I've had this said to me so many times, and it's typically by a man. It's at this point in your career with your own business, you should be making this kind of money. And if you're not by next year, then you should do X, Y, and Z. Always unsolicited, the shoulds that come out of, it. And there's no consideration for how I feel about how I'm doing, the passion that I have for it. It always comes down to the bottom line, which is the dollar.
It's true. That's because we like to stick our opinion on something that's measurable for other people. But when you really dig into some of the real success stories, where people have gone on to make them, to become self-made millionaires and billionaires, they've made lots of mistakes. A lot of them have been bankrupt and they learned from it. So it's all very well and good with our shoulda, woulda, couldas, but actually sometimes you've just got to I always smile when people say that and say, oh, I could do that, thank you, I'll consider that. But I recognize this bit's my life and this bit's they're my mistakes to make. And that doesn't mean I won't learn from people, because I will. But I do know that sometimes I've got to go with what feels inside. And I can either allow the fact that, everybody else can make my business work so much better for me than I can make it work. Or I can go, okay, I've got to go with what I feel is right. And I will ask for advice and I will take that on board and I will make my choices. But I acknowledge that they're my choices. Not always when people are giving the feedback do they acknowledge it's not their choice to make. So they can have an opinion, but they can't dictate that opinion. It took me a long time to get there, to not suddenly think, well, everyone thinks that I'm doing rubbish because they've got a better way of doing it. They've got their way of doing it. that just makes it different, not necessarily better or worse.
I love the confidence. And that's really important too, is that you have to believe in what it is that you're doing. Because as I've mentioned many times on this and other shows, people will throw stones. Sometimes they'll throw boulders or get someone else to help them heave the boulder over at you. And it caused me to take a moment and give consideration to what they're saying. And then at the same time, I have to say to myself, okay, no one understands this business like I understand this business. No, I'm not Oprah Winfrey yet. Right. That's what I have to say to myself, because people, especially with a television network, they'll compare it to one of the huge networks that have, a zillion people working there with unlimited resources. And they started out at some point in some way. And so for me, I just focus on bringing value and giving people a place to share their story as we continue to grow. So I say thank you. I appreciate what your thoughts are, but I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah, because you're living your passion and you're trusting your intuition. And I think that's what we do. And unfortunately, we devalue things that are free. So the things that come to us for free, we don't place enough value on, because we're so busy chasing things we've been told will make us successful. So things like kindness, compassion, listening, love, we're kind of like, well, they're just easy. Anyone can get those, until you don't have them. And there isn't anything in the world you wouldn't give to get them. And it's not until, unfortunately, very often people are on their deathbed that they realize that they may have all this money, but actually they missed out on the things that were genuinely priceless. And so I think, for me, and I'm trying to teach this to Scarlett, it's about, as long as you're kind, as long as you're not being mean to people and you're not being disrespectful, as long as you're kind and you're honest and you're willing to acknowledge and learn from mistakes, then you've just got to trust yourself and take a few risks, because who knows what life's going to bring you. But if you're so busy not owning your own path and being swayed by everybody else's version of your path, for so long I wouldn't share with anybody the disaster that was my private life. People just saw what seemed to be a seemingly successful career, because I feared what people would say. And then I realized it doesn't change who I am. Everyone can think I'm a horrendous person, that I've managed to fail so dismally in all of these things. But I've learned from all of them, and every one of them has helped shape me to be who I am, and to hopefully give me the skill set to help Scarlett and others to not have to go through the same mistakes to learn the same lessons.
Absolutely. You're leading by example, and you wouldn't be who you are today if you hadn't gone through what you've gone through. As something else I'd like to talk about, because I feel like this is an area where we search for some kind of validation that may never come. And that is in being an author. You're an author, I'm an author, and we put something out there that really resonates from our heart. We put a lot of work into it, and we don't get the reviews that we want to get. We don't get the sales of it. We don't get the awards. And you can look at that in a way as being a failure, or you can look at it from a completely different perspective. We have several shows here where we feature authors. So what would you say to somebody, because I think that's a big area where people can lose hope and lose faith, that you write a book, you have the book published, and maybe you don't have any reviews. Maybe the reviews, or you've one or two, maybe you don't have the kind of sales that you were hoping to have, but you feel like a failure.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's where we're choosing to validate our success or our failure. So we could look at it and go, we've written this book, we've put it out there, but actually maybe we haven't got as many reviews as we wanted to, or maybe we haven't got as many ratings, or maybe it's not made as a multimillionaire that we expected it to. But actually, what was your purpose for writing the book? Now, normally the purpose for writing the book probably was to be able to share a story, to share some knowledge, some insight, something that was going to add value. And they say there's a story in all of us. How many people get the story out? How many people actually don't just go, I think I could write a book, but sit down and go through the painstaking process of writing it? That in of itself should be successful, because so many people don't even get that far. But instead, what we do is we look at the top 1% that's going on and go, well, I'm not there, therefore I'm hopeless. Instead of looking at the fact that you're at least in the camp. That's the first step, is you took action, you moved forward. You did something that you didn't just think about it and talk about it, you actually did it. And therefore just keep doing those things and you'll get better at them. But equally, how willing are you to ask for the help? And I say this being somebody who is dreadful at asking for the help. In saying to friends and family, I could really do with your help on this. I put a load of effort into this, and whether you like it or not, I don't even mind if you rate it well or rate it badly, but just give me the feedback. Allow me to recognize that I can learn from what this is. So if you didn't like it, tell me what you didn't like. If you did like it, tell me what you did like, because that's going to be where I develop. But instead, we don't go and ask anybody else, but we take the lack of those reviews, the lack of those ratings, as being confirmation that it isn't good, when we don't even know if the person even read it. And we don't even know whether our friends and family read it, because we don't know if we asked them. So we get ourselves into a place, I think, often where we use those anonymous statistics to validate the fact that we're not good enough or that it isn't where it needed to be, without taking the risk of going and asking people that we trust, that will have our best interests at heart, and saying, could you do me a favor? Could you just read this and give me an honest review? Just to me. Doesn't need to go out to the public, because this isn't about what everybody else thinks. This is about what I think, because that's the only change that's actually going to make a difference, is when you can change what you're thinking internally, and then that's what shows up externally.
That's so true. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I will ask people when they come on to any of these shows about being an author or publisher, is why did you put this out there in the first place? Are you looking to be a New York Times best-selling author? Are you looking to make a certain amount of money, retire, and give up your full-time gig? And the answer is usually no. The answer is usually I had a story inside me and I wanted to put the story out there. And I also wanted to mention that on Instagram, a couple of months ago, a person I don't even know actually did a review of one of my books, and they tagged me. And I was like, someone is reading one of my books. I can't believe it. It's like shocking to me, because they got it from a library and they read the book and they did. And then I thought to myself, why am I putting myself in that state where it's not good enough that no one would even read it? That doesn't, like, why am I doing that to myself? So what I want to say on the other side is I teach these fitness classes, and literally after every class, I'll say to the people in the class, I would really love your feedback. Please share your feedback. And sometimes I get it. Many times I don't get any feedback, but then they'll give the feedback to somebody else, but they won't give it to me. So I know that you are also an expert in how to give feedback. Can you share some tips for our audience about constructive feedback and how to give it?
Yeah, of course. I think some of the time, when we say to people, give me feedback. I remember doing this. When I first got my first director's role, I go, please give me some feedback. And I'm like, okay, I completely appreciate your big boss coming in and telling you to give them some feedback is probably the most daunting thing that's ever going to happen, because you've got no idea how I'm going to handle that feedback until you've given it. So you are taking a lot of risk, and I acknowledge that. But trust me, I really want the feedback. But what I've learned in the last 30 odd years of leading people and coaching is, if you're ever trying to give anybody constructive feedback, the two of you are having very different conversations. You want to talk to the person about what you saw, what behaviors happened, what actions they took, and what the impact was. The person you're giving it to wants to tell you about what they were trying to achieve, because I don't really believe people are trying to get it wrong. They're not trying to do a bad job. They're not trying to fail at whatever you've asked them to do. And there's an exception that proves every rule. But in the main, people are trying to do the right thing. So that conversation never goes well, because you're not talking about the same thing. So one of the things that I do now is I sit down with people and agree first what I think they were trying to achieve. So I think you were trying to do this. I think you were trying to do that. I think you're trying to get here. Would that be right? And they're like, yeah, because what you do by doing that is you let them know you think they were trying the hardest. You don't think they're a bad person. You don't think they were trying to get it wrong. You don't think that they were just messing up because they didn't care. So now you become an ally into, that's a great goal. But do you mind if I share with you how some of what you're doing is not allowing you to achieve that goal? Here's some of the blind spots. And we have blind spots for a reason. We're blind to them. So even if it looks really obvious to everybody else, it's not obvious to the person doing it. And sharing that with them and saying, when you do this, while you're trying to achieve that, this is the impact it has. And maybe if you could do this instead, you'd have more chance of your impact and your intention aligning and you achieving that goal. So it's really about helping set the scene and making sure, and you talk so eloquently, Dr. Jacalyn, about elevated listening. I think sometimes we've got to take that into those situations and set the stage for the person that you're giving feedback to be able to listen. And the best way I've found of doing that is to agree the intention up front first. That way, they've not got anything to defend. You already know they're a good person. You already know they were trying to do the right thing. You already know that they were trying to succeed in the goal that they were in. So you're both in alignment on that. Now all you're there to do is help them and say, somebody said to me years ago, oh, you're a coach, you clearly think you're better than everybody else. I was like, no. I said, every top athlete, every top politician, every top actor, every top business person has a coach. That coach isn't better than them. If they were, it would be their name, we know. But what a coach can do is stand behind you and help shine a light on your blind spots. And when we're giving people feedback, that's all we're trying to do, is help shine a light on their blind spots. But we need to do that in a way that they feel safe and respected, and it's a safe, trusted environment for them to be able to listen to what it is we've got to say.
I love the fact that you use the word safe, because I think that's really important. The way that we give feedback can really have a major impact on whether or not someone continues down the path that they're on. And I'll give an example, and I've shared this with you before, and I'm going to keep it high level and anonymous, but I was given some unsolicited feedback about something, and the person actually had me in a corner. They literally kept coming towards me where I was backed up against the wall in a corner, and they had this kind of like threatening presence about them, and they were literally shaking, screaming and shaking, and I just acted like I didn't have any emotion, and I kind of took myself away from the situation, because I thought, what is going on with this person right now? Like, what's happening in their life that they're literally attacking me? They don't even know me, and they're attacking me. And I know it had nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. And so I let the person just get it all out. And when they finished, I said, excuse me, I said, how do you feel now? And the person started crying. They started telling me all these problems they have at home, and they just literally took it out on me. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that I think we also have to realize, how is the feedback being presented? Is it valuable feedback? Or in that case, I'm not going to take feedback from that person at that moment in time, because the way they were delivering it and how they delivered it and what they said was very hurtful. Yeah. And so that's not somebody, when we think about a coach or a mentor, that's not somebody that I want to follow.
No, and that wasn't somebody who was creating a safe space for you. So that was very much about them, not about you. And that's why I think, for me, if I make the effort to sit with the person and create the safe place, then I check in with them. I remember doing this years ago. We were doing I hate role plays. Doing a role play in a leadership development course that I was on. I was a team leader, and they asked me to get up and role play delivering feedback. And the first thing I said was, "Can I ask, how do you like to receive your feedback?" And they were gobsmacked. And I went, "What do you mean?" And I went, "Well, some people want you to just be blunt and straight to the point, and they'll get very frustrated if you're not that. Some people would like you to take some time to understand how they thought things went before you add in some of your own. But this is your feedback. The whole point of this feedback is for you to be able to get some views, and let's acknowledge that's all they are. Feedback is just my view of what happened, so that you can then add that to your own view and decide what you want to take from that. decide where that goes. But once you realize it's their feedback, it's the gift you're giving them, and therefore you look at it and go, is this a gift I'd want to receive if I were them? Well, actually, if someone's willing to tell me my blind spot and share with me how to get out of it, and that's going to help me achieve my goal, then yes, I might be a bit embarrassed that I didn't get it right the first time, but I'd rather get the feedback and be able to move on and get my goal than I would continue to be blissfully ignorant in my blind spot and be happy over here. But it really is about setting that stage, creating that safe space, and helping people understand, what's my reason for giving you the feedback? Is it because I'm having a bad day and I want you to have a bad day too? Because pity loves a party? That's never my reason for giving feedback. Or is it because I genuinely want you to succeed? And in doing that, if I genuinely want you to succeed, I will take the time to create the safe space. I will take the time to agree with you what the intention is for the feedback. And then I will take the time to share with you what I saw, and then provide some space to talk through different ways you might want to approach it.
KIM-ADELE, I always learned so much from you, and I love how you deliver the information. You are the consummate professional. Thank you again for being here. I want to say hello to everybody who's out there watching. When Kim is speaking, I will go and check on the different platforms. We have a lot of people watching across all the platforms. We'd love to know who you are. If you want to drop your name, maybe how we can connect with you on the social media platforms, that would be wonderful. KIM-ADELE, how can people reach out to you, and how can you help them?
Of course. So you can reach out to me. I'm on social media, either as KIM-ADELE Randall on the likes of LinkedIn, etc., or as KIM-ADELE10 on Twitter and Instagram. Or you can come and find me at www.authenticachievements.com, or email me directly at kimadele@authenticachievements.com. I'm always up for hearing other people's stories. I think that's how collectively we will grow. And I guess how I help other people is helping them find that path through to success for their business, for their team, and for themselves. So if you're wanting some support in how you take yourself to the next level, please do get in touch.
How can people get to be interviewed on your platform? Same things? Same ways?
Absolutely, same way. So either email me directly or drop onto authenticachievements.com and share with us who you think should be interviewed, if that's yourself, why it should be you, what's the story, what's your message that you want to get out, and we will do everything we can to help you to achieve that.
Fantastic. Thank you again, my friend, for being here. This is a great topic. I think it's one that many of us struggle with at some point in our life. And I just want people to remember that you have everything you need inside of you. But I do suggest getting a coach, getting a mentor. They're different people. I usually have 6 coaches at any time because I don't know everything and I want to learn as much as I can.
Absolutely. And it's finding the right person, the right person for the right situation. And you know, what I'd say is it is always within us, but sometimes we need somebody to help us to find it. And to create that safe space. We all need a safe space. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And we talk about vulnerability and we talk about all these things, but actually we first need to acknowledge it. It takes a lot more courage to be vulnerable and kind than it does to be closed off and unkind. So make sure you surround yourself with the people that are going to create that safe space and help you get there.
Thank you, KIM-ADELE. Look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Till next time, take care.
Till next time, bye. Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening, whether it's live or on the replay. If you'd like to be a guest, we have just about 45 different shows that are available for you to book in and register. Go to our website, which is usaglobaltv.com, and find the Book Your Session space, and that's an entire page of all these different shows, and go ahead and register. We'd love to have you come and share your story on this or any of our other shows. Please do also subscribe to our channel on YouTube, which is USA Global TV and Radio. You can see our logo here behind me. We're also on Roku and Amazon Fire, USA Global TV and Radio, the exact same logo. So we've tried to keep the consistent branding so you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We're We're literally on all of them. Thanks again for watching, for listening. We look forward to having you come back for our next show today. And again, wherever you're watching us now, please drop your name. Just drop a comment so that we can follow you and we can support your work. Thanks again. We'll see you again soon. Bye. This program has been brought to you in part by Zane Carson Carruth, etiquette and protocol expert, international award-winning author, television show host, and philanthropist. Thank you to Zane, our official diamond sponsor for USA Global TV and Radio in partnership with E360 TV. Zane is the author of The World's First Tooth Fairy Ever, as well as many other children's books. She's also the television host of Elegance, Polished Demeanor, and Posh Living, seen on USA Global TV and Radio.
Hi, my name is Zane Carson Carruth, and I'm the author of this book, The World's First Tooth Fairy Ever.
Reading is magic. Studies have shown that reading to your children lays the foundation for greater success in life. Reading helps develop language and vocabulary skills. It helps improve memory, and it encourages curiosity and inspires creativity. The benefits are immeasurable, and as a parent, you'll benefit too. In only 10 or 15 minutes a day, you'll be creating more memories and a bonding experience that will last for years to come. So take time to read to your children. Read them books about things that engage and interest them. Tales of fairies and magic fascinate children, and as everyone knows, the Tooth Fairy is at the top of the list. If your child loves magic, wands, adventure, and what child doesn't, you'll love reading them books from the trademarked series The World's First Tooth Fairy Ever. Follow along as Abella, the world's first tooth fairy, accidentally starts the tooth fairy tradition. Learn the tricks of being a professional tooth fairy in the book Abella Starts a Tooth Fairy School. Your child's imagination will soar as you read the adventures of Abella and her magic wand. These wonderful books are available at worldsfirsttoothfairy.com and at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Walmart.
To learn more about Zane, contact her through her website, zanecarruth.com, ZANECARRUTH.com. Order Zane's books and merchandise. Contact her about being a keynote speaker at your next event.